Good afternoon. I see folks are joining us. We have a few minutes to go before we get started on a media briefing regarding the disturbance last night on University Hill. So please take a few minutes to get settled and then we'll get started. Okay, it looks like we've achieved critical mass and it is right at 1 o'clock, so I'd like to go ahead and get started. My name is Sarah Huntley. I'm the Director of Communication and Engagement for the City of Boulder. It's fine to refer to me as the city spokesperson for the purposes of media coverage. We're here tonight to make a few statements regarding the unfortunate disturbance that occurred last night on University Hill. We have a number of partners here with us today. They will each be making a brief statement. A couple of folks who you see on camera here are simply here to answer questions, but each agency will be making some remarks. And then we'll open this up to questions. I see that we have some folks calling in today. So in order to be able to ask us our questions, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand by pressing *9 on your phone. For everybody else, we do have the Q&A box open, so you're welcome to start typing questions in there that I will facilitate when we get to that portion of the meeting, or you also are welcome to use the raise hand button and we will call on you as we get to that part of the meeting. I'd like to ask each person who's here, who you can see on your screen, to just briefly introduce themselves and let our media representatives know what agency you represent. So I will first go to our mayor.
Hi, this is Mayor Sam Weaver, City of Boulder.
Our interim city manager.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Maschuk, interim city manager for the City of Boulder.
Police chief. City police chief.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Mayor Harold, Boulder Police Chief.
Okay. How about CU police chief?
Hi, thank you so much. Doreen Joker, CU Police Chief.
We'll go to our other CU representative, Pat.
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick O'Rourke. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the city, or for the City of Boulder.
Terrific. We'll go to our district attorney.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Doherty, and I'm the district attorney for Boulder County.
And then we'll go to our public health director.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Sayak. I'm the public health director in Boulder County.
Okay. So as you can see, we have quite a representation here today of the different agencies that are working on this issue generally and are also working on an appropriate response to last night's situation on the Hill. I have a city statement that I'd like to read on behalf of the city, and then we will go down for each of the agencies to make a brief statement, at which point we will open up the Q&A. The City of Boulder condemns the behavior of those who organized and attended last night's party and will seek the strictest consequences, legal, economic, and when relevant, academic, for anyone who engaged in violence or destruction of property or refused to disperse when asked to do so by police officers. We are grateful that the injured officers are recovering and that no one else was hurt in this very dangerous situation. The public health stakes of this type of a gathering are high and potentially dire, not just to partygoers, but also to neighbors and other community members. Public health is advising anyone who participated in last night's event or came into contact with participants to quarantine for at least 10 days and monitor symptoms for up to 14 days. People should take advantage of free testing 7 days following the exposure, but please understand that a negative test before 14 days is not a guarantee there was no transmission. The university also offers testing. The city wishes to make clear that a gathering of this size, even absent a pandemic, would not be permitted in a residential neighborhood. All residents of University Hill, including students, have a right to quiet enjoyment of their homes and of shared streets and outdoor spaces. This conduct was not consistent with that expectation. Later this afternoon, the police department will issue a detailed timeline of the incident, as well as information about its response at each phase. We will say today, right now, that we took initial steps to disperse the gathering with as little force as possible. When it became clear, however, that participants were not responding, we realized we needed to communicate our expectations more strongly. The police department took a graduated SWAT approach, leveraging best practices for de-escalating disturbances. The responsibility for noncompliance rests fully on those who participated in violence and property destruction, as well as those who chose simply to stay and observe. The police department, public health, and the university are fully united in our response to this disturbance and will work together to ensure there are consequences for all those identified. Chief Harold has already communicated with District Attorney Michael Doherty, who's on this call today, and he has agreed that aggressive prosecution and penalties are appropriate. Anyone with information and/or photos or videos is asked to contact police by visiting the following website. I'm just realizing we don't have a chat. We'll put it in our release later on today as well, but it's https://tinyurl.com/University Hill disturbance. There's a way for people to upload information and provide information right there that will go directly to investigators and be made part of the case file. While we will accept anonymous tips, it is always helpful if tipsters provide contact information if they're comfortable in doing so that investigators can call them back and follow up for more information. Several outside agencies responded last night at Boulder Police's request, including the county and Colorado State Patrol, and the city is very appreciative of this support. The university, at the city's request, sent out a text alert using its emergency notification system, and we believe this had a positive impact on discouraging others from joining the area and getting others to agree to leave. The city believes this kind of coordination is essential and is committed to continuing to collaborate with partners proactively to prevent additional gatherings. We had already been planning for a coordinated approach with partners in connection with St. Patrick's Day and spring break. What occurred last night underscores the importance of proactive and holistic strategies. These include, but are not limited to, statements and code of conduct consequences from the university, nuisance and civil abatements that result in action being taken against property owners, misdemeanor and when appropriate felony charges. That concludes the city's statement. I'd like to go ahead, please, and turn the microphone over to Pat O'Rourke, who has some remarks on behalf of the university.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to begin my statement by thanking the Boulder Police Department and the other first responders who helped disperse the scene last night and work to protect our community. I'd next want to apologize to our University Hill neighbors and the Boulder community. We're very sorry that this occurred, and we will hold students accountable. The large gathering on University Hill Saturday night and the associated reports of violence towards first responders, extensive property damage, and blatant disregard for the public health orders are unacceptable on every level, and they are out of line with our values as a university. As Chancellor DeStefano has noted, a basic and non-negotiable condition for being part of CU Boulder is accountability to each other and to the community. We have stated in very clear terms that students must comply with community safety standards and public health orders during the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of our students have done so, and we appreciate their efforts. What we need is for all of our students to realize that the pandemic is not over and that we must stay vigilant to protect our community. We want to be clear to our students who continue to demonstrate through their conduct that if they can't meet our expectations, they are not welcome at the university. And there will be consequences for students who engaged in any violence towards law enforcement, property damage, or failed to disperse. Any student who either joined in the gathering in clear violation of public health orders or refused to disperse when asked by law enforcement is subject to disciplinary action. Any student who is found responsible for having engaged in an act of violence towards police officers or other egregious acts, including property damage, will face serious sanctions up to being removed from CU Boulder and not being readmitted. They may also face civil and criminal sanctions from the city and county, and we will be assisting in every way that we can with the district attorney's office and with Boulder Police to investigate the crimes that occurred. Additionally, there are a couple other things that we are asking of our campus community. First, we have consulted with public health experts, and as Sarah noted a moment ago, we are advising anyone who attended the Hill gathering to immediately quarantine and to seek monitoring testing on Thursday or Friday. Students will not be punished for completing your monitoring test. Student conduct does not have access to monitoring testing information. Next, we anticipate that faculty will continue to hold in-person classes this week, and we will continue to monitor COVID-19 cases and communicate any operational changes as necessary. We do understand that some faculty and students may be concerned about exposure risks in the aftermath of the Hill incident. We've instructed faculty to communicate any temporary alterations in plan for in-person classes with their department chair or deans and their students directly. Students should communicate directly with their instructors. To be clear, Saturday's events were unacceptable whether or not we are in a pandemic. We will be meeting with the City of Boulder, Boulder County Public Health, and Boulder Police Department to review this incident and to make changes in how we respond going forward. We will share updates this week on the progress of our investigations and the actions we're taking. So again, thank you to those who responded last night, and our deepest apologies to the University Hill community for the actions of our students. They were unacceptable and they will not be tolerated. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I'd like to ask the district attorney to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. The District Attorney's Office stands united with the offices and agencies that you see represented on the screen here today in condemning the outrageous actions of the young people on the Hill last night. I, like many of you, watched horrified as these things began to unfold because the selfish and callous disregard for the community is something that's unacceptable. The actions that the people engaged in last night were dangerous, selfish, and in fact, criminal. And I can promise you that the District Attorney's Office, along with our partners in law enforcement, regard this conduct as very, very serious. We will be working very closely with Boulder Police Department and CU Boulder Police Department, as well as other agencies, in the follow-up and the investigation into these actions. Let me be clear. The damaging of private property, other people's vehicles and property, as well as the assault upon police officers and first responders is unacceptable. Boulder is better than what we saw on full display last night. I would encourage people to cooperate with the investigation underway by Boulder Police Department and other law enforcement agencies. And if you or a loved one were in fact involved in the criminal acts that took place last night, I strongly encourage you to come forward. As Boulder Police Department begins to investigate and look at the video available and information being shared with them, I would encourage the people involved to own responsibility and step forward. In fact, that's often a mitigating circumstance that we look at when someone's involved in a criminal act of this nature. I want to thank the many wonderful members of this community who've been working so hard to sacrifice and to care for themselves and others throughout the pandemic. We've been doing a great job as a community in driving down the virus numbers and limiting the number of people who are in the hospital and dying as a result of the pandemic. And I know in a few minutes we'll be hearing from the Director of Public Health, Jeff Zayak, and he could talk directly about the progress we've made as a community. Last night was a tremendous setback that could have been avoided. So as restaurants and gyms begin to open up, as the courthouse begins to resume trials, which we just did this past week, the last thing in the world we want to see here in Boulder County is a spike in the virus numbers. And that's why I described last night's actions as completely selfish and a real callous disregard for the members of this community. It puts so many people at risk. And I hear people refer to it as a party. I don't regard people flipping over a car as a party. I don't regard people throwing bottles and rocks at firefighters and police officers as a party. Those are criminal acts and will be treated as such. And I stand united with our law enforcement partners, the university, and public health in condemning the actions of those who engaged in that conduct last night. And quite frankly, it gives CU and the other wonderful students at CU a bad name. So I encourage people to cooperate with the investigation. And if you're involved, please come forward and recognize your responsibility in the actions that took place. and help us to ensure that this community is safe and peaceful for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, I believe you have a few remarks as well.
Thanks, Sarah. And I want to emphasize a couple things that Michael just talked about. The videos from last night are shocking and disturbing, especially considering that Governor Polis had just warned the nearly 6,000 people that died in the last year with COVID in Colorado. The disregard of mask wearing, disregard of social distancing, and disregard on the limits of personal social gatherings clearly, as Michael said, was in violation of the orders from the state and is unacceptable. In addition, none of us want to see violence towards personal property and first responders. We know that many students here have been doing the right thing and following the public health requirements. The individuals who participated in this activity last night negatively impact all students at CU, our businesses, and our communities. This behavior put our businesses, our community, and individuals at risk and threatens the safe opening of the university to in-person learning as well. I feel for the residents living on the Hill that had to go through this traumatic event, and for the responders and the students who condemn this activity. We need to remember that the majority of the students are not doing this and need to assure that students are not all lumped into the same group together. We have come a long way in Boulder County at reducing our numbers. Our case numbers are dropping, our hospitalizations are dropping, and our deaths are dropping. Now's not the time to do these kinds of things. It will reverse the trend, just as it did in early September. And that's the last thing we need in our community. It's the last thing we need in our state. And it's the last thing we need at the university. So I urge all of you to work together to make sure that we are following these things for the next several months while we get our vaccines back out into the community. Thanks, Sarah. It's back to you.
Thank you. That's the conclusion of our prepared remarks and statements today. I'd like to go ahead and open up the phone line and the raised hand feature for individuals who have questions. We did get one question come in so far through the Q&A box. I think Pat addressed it. Was wondering if there was a threshold for expulsion or disciplinary action if students are found to have attended the gathering. And I think you addressed that in your remarks. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that, Pat?
I would like to be clear, which is that in terms of our actions, we are going to be looking first and foremost to identify those students who engaged in acts of violence, property destruction, and other misconduct towards the first responders. Secondly, we will be looking for the people who hosted and enabled the parties. And third, we will then be looking at disciplinary action for those who attended or failed to disperse. But our highest priority is going to be finding the people who engaged in the criminal conduct that the district attorney identified that would be absolutely unacceptable even in a pandemic. And we would encourage anyone who has knowledge of this to please report it immediately so that we can follow up appropriately with our law enforcement partners.
Okay, we have a question, I think, for both police chiefs. Have there been any arrests at this point? And if so, how many?
Thanks, Sarah, for that question. So yesterday we received approximately starting at 1:30 in the afternoon, public health order violations. And we did respond, give numerous warnings in the early afternoon hours, and citations were written for public health orders. And we're still looking into that. As far as the incident of last night, there was no arrest on the scene between the hours of 5 o'clock and 9 p.m.
Thank you. Do we have an estimate on how many people were involved at the height of the incident last night?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. And unfortunately, at the height of this incident, between the hours of, I would say between the hours of 7 and 8 p.m., there could have been anywhere from 500 to 800 people.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple hands raised, so I'm going to toggle on the mute unmute button for individuals. Brian Pietsch, I'm going to go ahead and turn you on first.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me all right?
We can.
Awesome. I'm actually calling in from the porch of one of the houses on 10th Street. I'm a reporter at the New York Times. I was my question was answered about how many people were at the height of it. So just to be clear, Chief Harold, there were no arrests made at all since this gathering happened?
No physical arrest during this critical incident, no.
Okay. I heard someone, I spoke with a student who said that there was someone who was getting arrested after they were dancing on top of an Amazon truck. Do you know about that situation?
Yes, I do, and that occurred earlier in the afternoon, like I indicated before, and that person was removed from the scene and issued a summons to return to court.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll go to Patrick Perez.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
This is also a question for the police chief of Boulder. Are you able to give us kind of like a timeline of, and I believe Sarah mentioned we might get that later, but I just want to get an understanding from you because we keep hearing different stories about Boulder police arrived at this time and then they did this, but then they left and it wasn't for several hours again until the party grew larger and larger, or however you want to call it, until Boulder police arrived again. And then also if you can just give us an update on how the police officers who were injured are doing.
Thank you for that question, Patrick. I can give you a general summary of our computer-aided dispatch calls for service on how this unfolded, and then we'll get much more detailed later in the afternoon as we get more into the details of the CAD system. But this is how it unfolded yesterday. So at approximately 1:30 p.m., Boulder Police started getting public health order calls for service. We dispatched our code enforcement officers to the area where they started giving warnings to a couple houses that were having parties. This, we believe at this time, was totally separate. This was occurring in the 800 block of 12th Street. Code enforcement officers handled that, indicating that the people that were attending these house parties were cooperative and not chaotic, and they were cooperative with code enforcement response team. This lasted until about 3:30 p.m. Absolutely no signs of any disturbances outside of warnings by the code response team. At approximately 5 p.m., we sent the Impact Hill, which is a specialized unit that deals with the University Hill area. They're very well known to community members, and they started to do dialogue with some of the people that were actively in groups of 10 or more. Again, not much resistance at that time at 5 o'clock. By the time 5:40 p.m. approximately, the crowd started becoming larger and larger. Hundreds of people responded into the 10th Street corridor. And at that time, approximately 5:48, SWAT commanders were notified, and we put out a county call for assistance from other SWAT teams. And we got a heck of a response. And I want to just thank our local policing agencies for sending us additional resources. By that time, the crowd reached several hundreds, and the crowd became very violent, disorderly. And that took until about 8:35 to contain and disperse. But that was only after several officers were injured. One could have been really damaging to this officer. Thank God he had a gas mask on, and the gas mask took the majority of the blow to this officer's face with a blunt object. So we're lucky that he's not suffering from serious injuries. So around 8:13 p.m., our SWAT commander took an armored vehicle and tried to communicate several times to the crowd to disperse. They failed to disperse, and it took till about 8:35 until we got the crowd contained and the most of the people dispersed. And we tried to push the crowd to the northeast away from the business community. So that's how chaotic and, just a chaotic experience for the officers.
Just a really quick follow. Yeah, thank you so much. Super quick follow-up.
Yep.
It's so hard to believe seeing all the videos and everything that happened, and obviously hearing that these officers were injured, that still no arrests were made. Is this because the officers just could not get into the crowd for fear of their own lives, or what was happening there?
Yeah, it would not be considered a best practice to send officers in to this crowd. We were just several hundreds of people in the crowd. I was on scene myself. And so it's much better to videotape this type of behavior and make arrest after. So yeah, I think we made a very restraint, calculated call not to do that. But believe me, we have excellent body worn camera video. The community is sending us video. There will be arrest. And so, yeah, it would not be considered a best practice to send officers into this crowd.
We're getting a couple of questions, follow-ups in the Q&A box, Chief, about the methods of dispersion that were used, a specific question about whether tear gas was used. Could you please outline what we can about that?
Yeah, as our SWAT commanders were trying to get the crowd to move to the north and to the east, away from the business community, the crowds became, like I said, very chaotic, throwing bottles, throwing rocks. City property was damaged, cars were being damaged. It was decided after numerous dispersal orders were given by the SWAT team that we would limit some tear gas into the area to see if we could get some dispersal. It seemed to have a limited impact, and we're reviewing body-worn cameras to see the actual impact of the probably 2 canisters worth of tear gas that was deployed.
Thank you. There have been some rumors of rubber bullets. Can you clarify whether anything like that was utilized last night?
Thanks, Sarah, for the question. To my knowledge, no other less lethal weapons were used.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Steve Stager, I'm going to go ahead and toggle your mute unmute on.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can.
My question's for the chief, Steve Stager from 9 News. You had mentioned no arrests. I'm curious about your decision to use force in a situation where your officers are being assaulted. What is the protocol for that? When would you use force in that kind of situation? And why would these officers not use force last night?
We did use limited force, as indicated before. We did deploy a limited amount of tear gas into the area, which got to the desired effect. And I think the decision not to use other force mechanisms was the right decision. Obviously, with this crowd, we do not want to agitate further. And I think at that time, the SWAT commander felt that there was some level of disbursement. So I think we made the right decision there.
And then just a quick follow-up. As students remain in school, do you have concerns moving forward in the next few months that you're going to be dealing with a situation like this all over again?
Well, I think that you see the team around me right now. I think that we'll be talking on a daily basis moving forward, and hard decisions will be made. And I think that our work with the district attorney's office and CU, I do think that will have an impact. And obviously, I don't want this to continue to happen. This behavior is totally unacceptable. And I think that we are lucky not to have serious injuries. And again, I just want to thank the police officers that did respond, because the restraint and the tactical coordination for something like this is very challenging. And not to walk away with severe injuries is something I think that the community should applaud. And that's the way I'm looking at it. And I am sure that we will continue to work together to prevent these kind of incidents moving forward.
Thank you. I'm going to toggle on Fox 31 to ask a question.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know that you said that there's been a lot of body cam footage that is going to be crucial to this case. Will that be released to the public? Can we make a request to use that or not because of the investigation?
Thank you for the question. I have a really talented district attorney here, but we will not be releasing any body-worn camera until the investigation is concluded. And Michael, if you have anything further.
Thank you for the question. I agree with the chief. Until the investigation is concluded, we'd be unable to release the body-worn camera video. I don't anticipate the investigation taking too long, and certainly we recognize the need to be transparent and to have the video made accessible to the media and to the community. So you can count on that happening in the near future. And I would just take this opportunity again to highlight a lot of folks were out there with iPhones who were videoing things themselves. And I really encourage those folks to share those with law enforcement so we can move forward with the investigation and wrap it up as quickly as possible. Thank you.
I'll just say the link that I shared during our remarks and that I've also put as an answer in the Q&A box for people to be able to copy and paste is a site that allows for people to share their videos and their photos and have them go straight to investigators. So I would echo that request. We have a couple of questions about whether we can be more specific about the blunt object that was used that for the officer who was wearing the gas mask. Do we have that level of detail?
I do not at this time. I was told last night on the scene that it was, it looked like some type of rock, but I don't have that confirmed at this time.
Thank you. There's also a report some eyewitnesses are saying that a mob charged at the officers. Can the chief expand on that? I suspect we were dealing with large crowds, but what is the characterization you've heard?
Yeah, as we were trying to contain that entire block, we situated police vehicles on in the 1100 block of 10th Street, and numerous, I'm talking like over 100 people started running toward the police officers, and we made the tactical decision to remove those officers from that area.
Terrific. I'm not seeing any other hands raised or any other question. This is the last call. Okay, I've got Henry Larson. I'm going to toggle you on.
Hi there. Yes, thank you very much. I had a question to follow up that something District Attorney Doherty said. So you said that you would not classify this as a party. What would you classify it as?
Well, good afternoon, Henry, and thank you for your question. Certainly, it seems to have started out as a party, but I want to be really clear here. I don't consider flipping over cars, causing property damage, in other words, inflicting property damage upon other private citizens, victims, and then throwing bottles and rocks at fire trucks and police officers as a party. I think it's a mistake for us to classify it as such once those acts began to take place. And to me, those acts are clearly criminal. So in my mind, there's a distinction between a party and what we saw on display last night, and that's why we're here together today. And that's why we'll make sure that we have a response that is full and appropriate.
Thank you. Brian, I see your hand raised again. Do you have a final question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I know Jeff from the public health was kind of saying, you know, we don't want to group all these students in together. A lot of students that I spoke with on this block said they saw high school students, they saw transient people as part of the crowd, and they said a lot of these people here who were causing the damage weren't CU students. I was wondering if the university, the police chief had any comments on that?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment saying that that's what the investigation will detail out. I am sure that we had people from outside of the university campus here. There's no doubt about it. And that's what the investigation will reveal. So we'll just move forward with that, and we'll get all the details, and we'll know.
Were any police vehicles damaged? And I'm sorry, did you have something you wanted to add, Pat?
No, well, Sarah, I just wanted to say that to the extent that there were others who were involved in the incident, that understand that will be investigated, but we do know that there were CU students involved, and we are not going to try to shift the blame for what was actions that occurred with CU students, and we will be cooperating with all investigations.
Thank you. Question has come in about police vehicle damage. I will say we do have some photos of some damage, which we will send out shortly this afternoon along with the timeline. Chief, can you characterize what vehicles sustained?
Yeah, the most significant damage that we had, and first I have to tell you, there was a lot of community members' vehicles damaged as well, which is so unfortunate because people have to depend on those vehicles for livelihood issues. But we did have a very severe injury to one of our SWAT vehicles, causing thousands and thousands and thousands worth of damage to it. And I know there was other public safety vehicles that were damaged as well, and very unfortunate, very costly.
Can Hill residents expect to see increased patrols, both from CUPD and city police?
Yes, it can. In fact, I'm working with Chief Jokers now on a deployment strategy using a hybrid method of her officers and my officers patrolling at the same time. And I think that for the next several days, you'll see our impact team and other undercover officers in the area as well, seeking intelligence. And obviously, you'll see our code response officers out there as well.
Okay, I'm going to take 3 more questions and then we're going to close for today. I believe this is a question for Jeff Zayak. Jeff, how possible will it be to figure out if future community COVID cases or outbreaks are in fact connected to this disturbance?
just as we have done in the past, we will be able to look at our data. It's usually 5 to 7 days, or I'm sorry, 7 to 9 days after a event like this where we would expect to start to see increases. We can look at our data to see how much of an increase we have as it compares to the baseline. As you know, or for folks that are on the phone know, we are looking at our case numbers by age group as well, so we can see what happens with age groups around an event like this.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to toggle on Steve Stager, and then I'm going to toggle on Brittany Shamus, and then we'll conclude our briefing. Steve, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you very much. I appreciated that the closed captioning called me Steve Steak, which gave me a quick chuckle this afternoon. One more question for the chief as we circle back to that decision to have your officers retreat. Can you take us into that situation? Because I think I've seen some video of it where it looks like it's like 2 SUVs and then a whole crowd of people just kind of comes running down the road at your officers. At what point of the night was that? And was the decision made to go in with a smaller number of officers and then later on with a larger group? Or can you kind of just take us through that moment?
Yeah, this is what I'll tell you generally. I haven't reviewed all the body worn camera myself, but this is what I'll tell you. Ideally, you want to send officers in and start identifying influencers in these crowds that can have influence to either be taken out themselves or have the authority and power to disperse the larger crowd. That was tried, that failed. The officers then tried to contain the crowd so we could have a SWAT response to push the crowd to the northeast, which would have been the best for the safety of the community. That failed. And so at that point, decisions have to be made on use of force options, getting a much more robust response from our policing partners. All of those were done. All of it escalated and de-escalated as the crowd dispersed. And so until I get an opportunity to look at that myself and to do a complete debriefing with the SWAT, that's what I know at this point. I hope that's helpful, Steve.
Okay, and lastly, Brittany Shamus.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I just wanted to ask for a bit more detail on the officers who were injured. I think I've read that there were 3 officers injured, and I know you mentioned the one who could have had a serious injury, but I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the kinds of injuries these officers had and how they're doing now.
Thanks, Brittany, for the question. The officers are in good condition. Like I said, the worst of it was a blunt object was thrown right into the face of one of our officers. The other were minor injuries from bottles or rocks being thrown at them. And one of the officers was struck in the hand, didn't have any coverage over his hand. So all minor injuries, but could have been much worse considering the projectiles that were being thrown at them.
Okay, thank you so much. On behalf of the city, I'd like to sincerely appreciate each partner who took time out of their day today to be here and respond to questions in a firsthand way. As mentioned, we will have a press release a little bit later today with a link to this full recording, the prepared remarks for individuals who had prepared remarks, or I believe a few folks spoke ad hoc during the session. That will be captured, of course, by the recording. We will also release a detailed timeline and some photographs that the media is welcome to use. And I will reiterate the link that individuals can use to provide information and share videos and photographs, because as indicated here, we will be following up on those, and they will be essential as part of the criminal investigation and prosecutions that follow. Thank you once again. I appreciate everybody. I appreciate our media partners for helping us share the urgency and severity of the situation, and we will be in touch again soon. Bye-bye.